Hey everyone, good morning again. Thanks for being here. There we go, you guys should be able to hear me now. Thanks again, Mark, for the lead-in. We're glad you're here this morning, and it seems somewhat appropriate with the first weather event on deck that we have the winter outlook. So what we're going to cover, looking ahead, we will look at the official winter outlook and look how La Nina can help provide clues for what to expect in the coming winter months. We'll also cover some of our typical winter patterns and the weather associated with them. We will also be demonstrating and displaying some new tools to help with decision support. And lastly, we will cover some safety resources available to you and some of the support services we can provide. Ultimately, we are here for you all with the goal to help you reach more people, be safer, and or make better decisions. So we want to help everyone be weather ready, and working with you allows us to achieve and go towards that goal. NOAA's seasonal outlooks, if you didn't know, come from the Climate Prediction Center, or CPC. They provide a range of forecasts from sub-seasonal to seasonal time period scales, and they range from 6 to 10 days, 8 to 14, to 3-month outlooks. For this information, you can access it yourselves if you go to the cpc.nsep.noaa.gov. Again, their primary goal is tailored to more for outlooks and forecasts in weeks and months ahead. When it comes to the interior Northwest, one of the big predictors is ENSO, or the El Nino Southern Oscillation. It's a recurring climate pattern and involves changes in the temperatures of waters in the central and eastern equatorial Pacific and the weather pattern down there in the Pacific Ocean Basin. Why it's important is its warm and cold phase, El Nino or La Nina respectively, serves as a key predictor for our climate prediction, and it's really the best game in town for us to really put out a longer term forecast for what we could possibly expect. Presently, we are in a La Nina advisory, where the La Nina conditions are being observed, and they are more than likely to continue through the 2021 winter season. Thanks in part to the ongoing La Nina, it provides us some better odds or a tilt in the winter forecast to favor wetter and cooler conditions than normal. This plot just shows the likelihood for the phase over the next several months, and we can see here going through February, March, April, 3-month period, we're expecting La Nina to be forecast and to prevail. So with La Nina, there's a shift in the large-scale pattern, and it promotes a tendency for two traits to prevail. Specifically, La Nina modifies the jet stream with a wave-like Pacific jet stream retracted and shifted high over the North Pacific, and La Nina results in a more blocking pattern with a big area of high pressure south of Alaska. This setup is important because it's conducive to allow colder air to spill into the area, and it also favors a storm track that brings more precipitation to the Pacific Northwest. That said, there's more to it, and the weather associated with La Nina doesn't mean we will see these things play out the way they typically do. And it's important to know that all La Ninas are alike, with different La Nina winters playing out in different fashions. La Nina is associated again with cooler temperatures and above average precipitation. La Nina gears are generally bringing an enhanced winter snowpack to the mountains, and this means we'd see or anticipate increased average seasonal snowfall over the Blues and the Cascades. However, the signal with La Nina for wetter weather is best generally outside the Columbia Basin. This can be demonstrated in the image to the left, which shows the difference from average essentially favors neither increase or reduce snowfall over the parts of the Columbia Basin. In regard to temperature, overall, there's more reliability in that correlation. When it comes to these seasonal outlooks and for longer lead times of 3 months, remember, weather is what you get, climate is what you expect. Try to think about it this way, that climate is just the average of that, or what occurs, which can be comprised of cold spells, snowstorms, as well as dry, mild bouts. So here's the official winter outlook for December, January, and February. Wetter than average conditions are favored for central and northeastern Oregon and south central Washington, which is pretty consistent with a La Nina pattern. For temperature, odds are tilted to cooler than average for much of Washington with equal chances over Oregon. It's noted by that white color. With equal chances, this means there is no tilt in the odds towards any outcome of warm, cool, or average temperatures, and they are all equally likely. This doesn't mean average temperatures or above average temperatures won't occur or that the average conditions are forecast. Generally speaking, with equal chances, the signal wasn't that strong, so it's kind of somewhat of a difficult forecast situation. In terms of drought, conditions are expected to improve in Oregon and Washington. With a La Nina climate pattern expected, the expectation is drought conditions will improve and is the most likely scenario for much of Oregon and Washington. To kind of demonstrate the variability, here's a look at Bend in the last 22 La Ninas, where we saw 12 had below normal snowfall years and 10 were above normal. However, the outliers were well above average. A lot of variability is present between La Nina winters, and this kind of just hits home out each season with La Nina. It's different. The average snowfall in all the La Nina winters actually came out ahead over all the years on record. This is in Yakima. Slightly more than half of La Nina years saw above normal snowfall. When considering all the years, again, a lot of variability is present, and the average of all La Nina winters came out ahead over all the years on record. But you can see that there's quite a spread between these La Nina years and what was actually average. The bottom line up front is the connection between La Nina and the winter weather in the interior Northwest isn't perfect, and it varies over the region, and between La Ninas. That said, because we know it's a La Nina, provides some insight into this winter with better than average chances for cooler, wetter winter weather than what we typically see. In general, the reliability for how often the sign was above, below, or near normal is strongest for temperatures than precipitation. Overall, there are higher odds of an abnormally higher winter snowpack to the mountains with greater precipitation and cooler temperatures favored. And for insight, recent La Nina winters tend to start off on the mild side in November, but turn colder and cooler through the winter. Often we see recent La Nina winters start off with a near average precipitation in November, but then trend toward drier than average for the rest of the winter, especially in western and northern Washington. Now we'll take a look at some of those typical winter patterns we see that in their sensible weather impacts with Mark. So I will switch it over to him.
Thanks, Ed. All right, can everybody see my screen okay? All right, so picking up where we left off there, just wanted to cover some of the common patterns we see that would expect to bring us winter weather, and then highlight some of the tools and resources that are available out there to help you in spreading the message of potential winter hazards to your end users or the people that work for you, or perhaps some of the other folks in your personal lives even. So just real quickly here. The system we're expecting this coming weekend, it doesn't have really the orientation this hypothetical one does here on the left, the image you see on the left. But it is analogous to kind of a more common wet season pattern we would see, where our snow levels aren't low enough that we get snow all the way down to the valley floor, but we get appreciable mountain snow and additional snowpack in the mountains. So there's kind of a couple different variations of this. Obviously, this is the one where the mountains pick up a hefty amount of snow, and the valley and the basin they just get a good, nice, cold, dreary, wet rain, right? And this is a fairly average, fairly common pattern. The ones that aren't as common, that are obviously much more significant, are those where we have a preceding Arctic front that comes through, or perhaps it's several frontal intrusions that come in out of Canada, and they bring this very cold Arctic air that sits in place across the basin and hovers around the mountains and everything else. And that can sit there for days and days. And when we have a situation where that cold air is locked in place, and then we have an upper level storm system that passes over that, and it doesn't have to be as powerful as this hypothetical situation here. It can just be a little, fast moving system. That's when we really see the more significant snow events for the low elevations into the Columbia Basin, affecting not only those areas, but also the mountains. Even see heavy snows on the west side of the Cascades as well, as we did a couple of years ago, which I will note a couple of years ago was not a La Nina year. And as you recall, we ended up with record snowfall. So you got to take these seasonal outlooks with a bit of a grain of salt. Yes, there is a long-term signal there, but that does not mean we may not get one major event, that pretty much marks the whole year, that makes us remember, oh, that was a bad winter because of that one event. So you got to keep that in mind. But this pattern here on the left, this hypothetical, this is the one that's far more impactful for us, where we see, significant travel issues across the entire region, pretty much the entire Northwest if something like this happens. Something else I wanted to bring up though, and we don't talk about it a whole lot, is the pattern that favors air stagnation. I had an image very similar to this actually in our summer outlook, and it was kind of the reverse. We have high pressure overhead in the summertime. That's when we have the really hot days. If we have dry thunderstorms, that's a big fire concern. You take that in the wintertime, when it's typically our cooler season, we have a very low sun angle. We can't heat up very much. This is where we get the strong temperature inversion setting up. In other words, we get really, cold air in the low levels of the atmosphere, and the temperature actually warms as you increase in height. And what that does is it just traps all the air near the ground. It can't go anywhere. And so this is the pattern we see when we get the low stratus that develops over the Columbia Basin, the fog. If it's a really bad event and we have some Arctic air in place, it can be a freezing fog event. And, those have been known to last for days sometimes. And you'll end up with ice all over the trees, all over every fence that's out there, everything that's outside covered in the rime ice. And that can even cause travel problems after a period of time because you get enough ice collecting on the roads that they become slick. So just because we don't have a big storm system coming into the area doesn't necessarily mean we're not going to have impactful conditions felt at the ground. Sometimes some of the worst events are these air stagnation, high pressure sitting overhead, and there's just this thinnest coat of ice on the road, and people can't see it, and so they just drive along like nothing's going on, and before you know it, you've got a pile up. So that's something to keep in mind, and it's something that we will be messaging for as well as we move into the winter season. A couple of resources I want to bring to your attention here, and I will note this image does not come from the current event that we're forecasting. Now, this is an old event. If you look at the top, it's November 28, 2019. But the Weather Prediction Center, which is affiliated with the Weather Service, they actually put together this winter storm severity index. And it takes into account a number of different factors and tries to basically just assign a simple color scale to the impact that might be felt at a specific location. So in this hypothetical example here, you can see much of Central Oregon is in the moderate to major impact. You even see some extreme impacts there west of Bend and parts of Deschutes County in some of the higher elevation areas there. And so what this does is it allows people to get a broad sense, kind of a cumulative sense of how impactful a certain winter event is going to be. And it takes into account a number of different things, as you can see here. The snow amount, whether there's going to be blowing snow, is there going to be any ice accumulation? So it's a number of different things that it pulls in. And you probably will be seeing some graphics like these as we move through the winter season. We did look at the Winter Storm Severity Index for this coming Friday, Saturday event. And surprisingly, it's not pointing to a huge impact across the Washington Cascades, but I think that also has to do with climatology. Toward the end of October and early November, it's not uncommon for the Central Washington Cascades to get a decent snow event. So I think it's picking up on that. This is a smart tool. It actually takes into account the climatology and the frequency of events. It did actually pick out Northeast Oregon, where maybe The climatology doesn't suggest that a snow event of that magnitude is quite as common. All right, continuing on here. I've already really glossed over some of the probabilistic stuff, and I know I sent the email out a few days ago explaining it. So, definitely something you'll want to take a look at as we go through the winter. We use some of these graphics in the briefing this morning. I expect you'll see more of those as we go through the season. And it's just a really fantastic tool to be able to assess what the official forecast for snowfall is, as well as what the reasonable worst case might be for planning purposes, and also the low end amount that you're going to get at least this much. So be prepared for at least X amount of snow in your location. And what's great about that is it also has the probabilities for different snow totals. So in this case here, we're looking at, I think this was the one I pulled up actually last night for this coming event. The 1 inch of snow, also 4 inches of snow, and it goes all the way up, I think, beyond 12 inches if you go on the web page. There's also a table format, which is really great because you can pick out specific locations, kind of go across the row there and look at what your probability of meeting or exceeding each specific snow amount is. And you can also get an idea of what your kind of worst case scenario is and what the forecast is. Something to note is, if you're going across one of these rows here in the table and you're seeing major differences between the low end snow amount and the high end snow amount, what that should tell you is that there's a lot of variation between all the models in terms of what it's predicting for snowfall. So the larger the difference between those two numbers is, the larger the lower the confidence is. So it's kind of a reverse relationship. If those numbers are fairly close together, that means our confidence is pretty high and the forecast is probably going to be a lot more accurate. Okay, just want to point you to another couple of resources here. The winter weather safety page at weather.gov under the Weather Ready Nation tab is a great resource. There's tons and tons of social media images there that you can pull down and use ahead of any event we're expecting. And it doesn't necessarily have to just be a snow event. In this case, the example I have here is wind chills, which is something we may be concerned about Sunday morning, especially as we have just a little bit of wind and some very cold air in place. So definitely would encourage you to take a look at that and use those. Also, just want to remind you, I know we don't have a whole lot of events anyway in the wintertime, and certainly this year with COVID-19 still kind of in full force, a lot of things are moving to a virtual format or are being postponed. But if you do have an event that you have planned, then reach out to us if you would like weather support for that event, or maybe you just want to be able to give us a call and get an updated forecast. We are always happy to help you out with that and provide weather information. This image at left is actually taken from the Eagle Cap Extreme. That's a Iditarod qualifying race that's held up in the Wallowa Mountains each year, and we have provided support to them for that. So that is one of the things I wanted to remind you of. And just a few links to some additional resources that are out there. I will send a PDF of both the briefing and this winter outlook out to all our partners. So you can go back and look at that and you'll have all these resources at hand and you can pull those down. Also, we'll put a recording of both of these up on our YouTube page and send a link out to you. It'll take a little bit of time, probably won't get it out until either later today or tomorrow morning, but I will have that available. So I really appreciate your time this morning. I know you had to stick with us for a while, but we had a lot to cover, obviously, and I hope you guys got a lot out of it. I will go ahead now and unmute the line. So if you have questions for either myself or Ed, we can take those.